probably been a very, very long day. For me, it's gone by like this, but however, and we are very, very privileged to have with us today Mr. William Zimmerspitz, who you see before you. And this gentleman is a survivor of the Krakow ghetto. He was in Plaszow concentration camp, Auschwitz, Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen, and he was liberated at Mauthausen in Austria. Currently, he sits on the New Jersey Commission of Holocaust Education, which is our gracious benefactor for this workshop. And Mr. Zimmerspitz, thank you so much for being with us. Would you like to move that over here more to the middle?
It's fine.
Okay,
Right. Anywhere.
Do whatever you know.
First of all, I want to good afternoon to wish you good afternoon to everyone here. And I appreciate your invitation, Ms. Overly, and also Mrs. Shirley Tannenbaum, who was kind enough to bring me up here because I get lost in these little towns. So I'm thankful for those people that were able to help me out in coming here. Now, in preference, which I would like to preference my lecture here, or whatever it is called, I would like to say this: contrary to what we are told, the passage of time does not ease the pain nor diminish the scope of the horrors which was the Holocaust. We must never stop telling this story until it's etched in the minds of our young and until it has become a part of our children's lives and heritage. We must do it because it is our sacred duty to alert the young to the evils of man. We must never be lulled into false sense of safety and security. Now let me start with my own history and little story that my past and so on, that you know who I am and what I went through. I'm a survivor, as Ms. Oakley so well said, of these concentration camps. First ghetto, Krakow. Then from the ghetto, we were moved to Krakow, which then first was known as Arbeitszwangslager, which was the concentration camp later on. Then from then on, I was again moved to, by the end of 1945, where I was in Krakow, in 1945, January, when the Russian army were coming from the east, and from the west, the Allied forces were moving in. They immediately took us in the last days, took us to Auschwitz. We went there by foot. That was about 40 kilometers, if I'm correct on that, from Krakow to Auschwitz, where we were shipped. Of course, Auschwitz then was partly already evacuated because the Russian artillery was hurt there already, and they partly were evacuated. So when we came, we were 400 people. We were immediately shipped on trains, on freight trains. We were with the rest of whoever was left there in Auschwitz, with the inmates. We were shipped to first to Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen. This trip was awful trip. I never can forget that, because we were loaded in freight cars, open freight cars. It was winter, January, where the weather was about 30 below. That's as cold as it gets in Europe. We were shipped, and about 170 men were handed to a freight car, which we were packed like sardines. And half of these people were in a very terrible condition. They were skeletons, nothing but bones and skins on them. We were fortunate in Krakow that I was coming with the group. We had, our food was not the best, but it was very good comparatively, because we were liquidating the camp. So the Germans knew that whatever they're going to have to leave, they'll leave it to Russians. So instead of that, they told us, you eat whatever you can, and we'll satisfy yourself as far as clothing. So we came in we were dressed properly for the winter, and we also were good fed. The others, as I say, the 170 people may be loaded to a freight car there. Approximately, I say, depended on the individual freight car, and we were loaded there and with the escort, with the SS, they were with the machine guns above. They had a little housing, like for on the freight cars. Certain freight cars had this little booth there, and they were lodged there, and with a machine gun, of course. And we were shipped from there to Oranienburg, and the last camp that I was liberated, as Ms. Overly said, it was Mauthausen. And we were there where I was liberated. But let me tell you, I just gave you a sketch where I was and so on. Now, let me tell you the circumstances that we were shipped. I lived in Krakow. I was born in Krakow, Poland. At the age 13, the German army marched into Krakow, of course, as we know, in that Blitz, September the 1st, at the Blitzkrieg, which was the war. It was, what would you say? Blitzkrieg is a they came over the Poland. Within 2 weeks, the whole Polish army collapsed. Of course, the Polish army was not prepared for an onslaught of the Germans like they came in, and they immediately took over Poland. They were certain there was opposition there, but they squashed. There was no, you couldn't, by any force, you couldn't exist too long with the army that they came in, the force that they came in. Lightning. That was, I was looking for that word. It was a lightning war. The Blitzkrieg was the lightning war. What happened there, and immediately, of course, the Germans, after a few weeks, occupying Krakow and Poland altogether, and I lived in Krakow. Krakow was about 600,000 inhabitants lived there. Out of this 600,000, 10%, I would say, were Jewish, approximately. And immediately after they walked into Krakow, the first thing what was done, immediately what they did with the Gestapo came in, and also they had the Schutzpolizei, which was the police, the German police, they had the Sonderkommando. They were specially assigned to murder of the Jews. That time, of course, they didn't use that word yet, and it was not known as murder, but they were assigned to the Jewish issue. Of course, immediately the curfew was, they imposed a curfew on the population of Krakow, and by 10 o'clock nobody could move out of their houses. Everything was, they came out to their houses, looked for arms and anything else, and there are any leftovers or army men that were in opposition to the occupation. These people were immediately eliminated on the spot. What meant they were taken in, and we knew that they doomed for death. So what they did, loaded them up on the trucks, and took them out of Krakow, outside Krakow in the forest, and they cold-bloodedly shot these people. We knew that from people that saw that firsthand. They came back to Krakow. The information came back to us that these people were shot. Second, then the next thing what they did there immediately was arrested all these people that were involved in politics, people, intellectuals, Polish intellectuals. That means Jews or Poles the same way. We were treated the same way. They were arresting them, and also the professors of college. We had a great university in Krakow, the Jagielloński University, which was very well known throughout Poland, and also the, more I say, people in any position, political positions. These people were taken at night, in the middle of the night, and they were taken and loaded up in trucks, and also they were put into jail. We heard that they were put into, there was a famous jail where the Germans had taken over while after they occupied Krakow. That was the jail, Montelupi was called, and there these people were herded into cells. 20, 30 people to a cell where normally 2, 3 people would share. And after a few days, it didn't take too long, we also heard that these people were murdered in the courtyards of the jails. all these intellectuals and things. But some people were doubting how that can happen, and the rumors in the papers were that this is not so, that these people will be let free after a while, interrogation and so on. But that never happened. These people never returned to their families. So we knew what was happening there. After a while, the Jews were free yet too. With my parents, I had parents. My father was he was a partner in a liquor factory, so we were in the upper class there. Were yet conducting his business. He went to conduct his business normally, and the others, they were not. But from the streets, they were catching Jews or anyone that they saw that looked like Jewish, because we were the Jews of Eastern Europe. They were not the blue-eyed blonde people usually, so they were easily identified by the Germans, and also they have their collaborators. They had the Polish collaborators who were one time, they identified with the German nation. They called these people as Volksdeutsche. What meant this is someone that is from the ancestry of Germans. Of course, when German army came in and the Gestapo, so they very gladly identified with the German nation, and they immediately used them for their benefit to seek out people that were in hiding, who were politically involved, and so on. These people were pointing out Jews on the streets, and the Jews were taken into forced labor. What that meant, sometimes they would go into a trolley car where people would go to work and seek out Jews. There, the Jews were herded into trucks again, taken into a barracks, billets, German billets, and then they were put to work, beaten up many times, terrible. And my father was beaten up very badly one time. I never forget that. He came in all bloody after one of those. First of all, many of those people that they were herded, they were taking to this kind of a work, they never worked that kind of manual or hard work. They were professional people. Some of them were doctors. Some of them were business people. The other were educators and so on, from all kinds of walks of life. But they were not. They never worked physically as hard as they were put on. There they had to clean the latrines, the soldier latrines, so on, so all kinds of menial work. But this wasn't the worst thing, because, as I mentioned to you, they were terribly beaten up and everything else. But came back, we were glad to see him, my father back. He was all bloody and so on. So we asked him what happened. He told us that they were beating people unmercifully for no reason at all, just getting vengeful for no reason at all. Yet we were thankful to God that he came back, to see him back, because we didn't know what happened. And after that, not long after that, again, the Jews came out in order of the governor then, was the Governor Frank of the occupied Poland. He was stationed in Krakow. His headquarters were in Krakow, came out in order to the Jewish population that every Jew from 6 and on age has to wear an identification band. What was the identification band? The identification was a Jewish, on a white, about 15 inches, white band on his armband with a Jewish star. That is, everyone has to wear that under the direct orders from the governor, and if anyone is caught without that band, or heavy fines will be imposed on him, or prison. So, of course, we were very proud to be Jews, and nobody thought any of this, so we put on the armband. We thought that this is something which nothing can hurt. And we are proud, as I said. So, but now we are very, very visible, identifiable to the Germans, and anything, now they come and people go to work, or go shopping, whatever it is, immediately they picked up from the streets and again put into different kinds of work or forced labor. Many of those people were also caught and they were put outside the Krakow. They did all kinds of factory work, whatever. We didn't know what happened to them, but eventually we got, through our friends, through our Polish acquaintances and friends, we got it back information that these people are working, even so they work very, very hard, but they are alive. So many people accepted that, and that should be the worst. Now, again, not long time after that, 1941, we are told that every Jew, again by order of the governor Frank, every Jew from Krakow must move, and we heard the rumors that there is a whole section in Krakow which was, people had to be removed from there. Whoever lived there in that section, which was called Pogush, must be removed from that section, and because the Jewish people will be moved in there. And what happened, within 24 hours, they gave everyone that order. 24 hours was an order, everyone, only what you can take in your possessions, in your two hands with valises, and you have to come into that section. Now, our family, of course, we had a very nice home where we lived to. We're comfortable there. We had friends, Polish friends, and Christians, and everybody else knew us from generations, and they were very, very sorry that we have to leave. We left many, many things with them, with our friends, and told them whatever it is, whatever you have to do, we have to go, and that's it. Many people thought that threatening already, and they were fortunate to have features that were blending into the Christian communities. There were some of them, not all of us were Semitic, looked Semitic, but some of us were. They had features, certain features, Nordic features, which were able to say to themselves, we are not going there because that was threatening to them. We are not going to follow this order. We're going to blend into the Christian community outside the ghetto, and we're going to survive there. But, of course, later on, many of those people paid with their lives because, again, of the collaborators and informers. They were seeked out by the German Gestapo and the Schutzpolizei, as I say, and the other Sonderkommando. They were seeked out and they were brought in, and they were shot. Many people, that's the first time we came in, we knew and we saw it. I saw it, where people were actually right in and put into against the wall, and whoever the Schutzpolizei was that time, what I saw personally, there was a Schutzpolizist, took out a gun, says turn around to the wall, and he just right away put a gun to his neck here in the back of his neck and threw him out. So that created tremendous fear. Now people, even that were secured in their hiding, came out and they were coming back to the ghetto because they were afraid that this is something which is going to be directed at them by death. So they were very, very fearful, and they came back. Some of them, not many, but some of them. Now we are in the ghetto. We are again letting out. We're going freely back and forth to work yet. My father had in the factory. We're fortunate enough. We had contact with the German government at that time, which the factory was working for the German government at that time, occupational forces, and he was able to get a pass outside for going out and being able to travel freely back and forth. Many people were restricted already. You could not go out of town without that kind of a pass. You had to stay within the Krakow territory, and especially if you were not working for the German government or German economy, you were restricted to the ghetto areas. You couldn't move out of there. There were police, and yet they were free. Even so, there was no yet fences there or anything else, but we were told not to leave this ghetto on such terms, only if you had a pass you were working for the German economy or the German government. My father, of course, was fortunate enough then, working for them. He had contacts with the Polish people that used to work in the factory, still working there. They were kind enough many times. There was a tremendous, first of all, when we came into the ghetto, they were herded we had an apartment. We have beautiful 5-6 rooms where we were herded with my family and 2 of my grandparents because we didn't want to leave them alone. We brought the grandparents into our apartment. There were about 7 or 8 people in one room, herded in. And you had children there. And if the apartment had 3-4 rooms, you can imagine 4 or 5 families living there with little children, maybe 4 children. At night, that was terrible for my grandparents, especially. They were older people to bear it, but yet that shouldn't be the worst thing. It happened, they say, we buried in the farm. Of course, again, that didn't last too long. This freedom in ghetto, the free movement of ghetto, one day we found ourselves being fenced into a wire, the Stecker wire, which is the barbed wire, was they brought in other Jews from other towns, from outside of Krakow, and the SS, under the SS guards, and they put up a fence around the ghetto, the fence with barbed wire. What was the information we got and the rumors we got, that this is something which is for our own protection, that they don't want the Jews to be maybe, some robberies or this. They like to have them protected. And many people, again, started to doubt that, and a lot of them, again, ran out of the ghetto. They tried to get assimilated to the general population. Also, they tried to make themselves pay. You had to have papers because constantly if you moved outside of a house, on the street, immediately you were held by the SS or by the Schutzpolizei for your Ausweis. What was Ausweis? Your identification card. They demanded identification card. By then, they issued already everyone an identification card. The Poles had to have identification cards, the general population, and the Jews had a King card, which was King card. We had to have, and it was stamped Jew on the King card, on the ID card, and of course, once they held you, stopped you, they knew exactly who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and so on. So this was the next step. This was a premeditated plan by the SS. This was all done in a very orderly German manner that they had it pre-planned. Now we are fenced into the wire, into the certain area. Not long after that, we have the SS, the Ukrainian SS, coming into the trucks, in covered trucks, with machine guns again, with the guns, and they encircled the ghetto where the fenced wire was there, and now they are asking everyone at the Bullhorns, the police. There was already established a Jewish police in the ghetto, which was the police of the ghetto. They were to police the ghetto. They were ordered to announce that everyone after 55 years old has to assemble on a certain place. There was assembly where they told them to assemble there, and everyone has to assemble after this age. People were also hesitant to do that because they didn't smell they smell a rat there. But yet, many of them, started to beat on the people, go house to house, and if they found somebody, they beat him up so badly, many people were shot there too, that they didn't want to appear at that place where they to assemble. It was terrible that time. My grandparents in my house, it was terrible. We had it was the end of the world for us because we were so attached to our grandparents. We were 2 children. That was my sister, myself, and my parents, and the 2 grandparents. We were attached to them. We were so sensitive to every move that they made. Now my grandparents have to appear, of course they have to after the age, they have to appear in that place where they assembled the whole thing. There, the assembly, they were carrying people, some of them had to carry them on stretchers, some of them came, they were invalids, they were helped by the others, and so on, and they were brought into that place where there were soldiers, SS soldiers with the Ukrainian police. So they called them the auxiliary police. They were literally collaborators with the Germans. Many, unfortunately, many Ukrainians, for what reason, I really don't know, but they were volunteering for that kind of work. They were very basically anti-Semitic, and they volunteered for that kind of work to the Germans. And they were the ones, the Germans were the order givers, and they were the order takers. They were doing the dirty job for the Germans. They were beating up people there in that assembly, and they were loading them up on the trucks. You can imagine the cries from the parents, the children were crying. It was terrible seeing it. I still have this picture before me. I never could get rid of that picture before my eyes when my grandparents were torn from us apart and were taken by force. My father protested, my mother cried, and everything. Nothing helped. They were torn apart from us and taken to that place. They came to the place, they loaded up already the trucks, covered trucks were waiting for them. And the rumors were, don't be afraid, they're not going. The Germans had spread a rumor through the Jewish Polizei, to the Jewish police, that these people were going to a different camp where there's they'll be provided with better food, with better living condition, standards of living and medical care, and so on. They'll be provided there. A lot of people were, they bought it. They bought it and felt, look, maybe they'll be better off there. So many people started to doubt it, and we were very, my family, we were crying for days after this incident. My mother, my father, and so on. We took it very, very hard. And so did other many families. But there was nothing to do. We couldn't do anything about it. This was it. Now, these people were hauled away in the trucks. There were maybe 50, 60 covered trucks, big trucks. They were loaded up maybe, I don't know exactly how many, but I'm sure 50, 60 people when they were thrown on the floors of that truck, because many of them were invalids, some of them were amputees and everything else. They disappeared. We were told again, as I said, that they were going to a better condition camp. Of course, this took a toll on everybody. People were just so in despair, and many people didn't care of anything. Many people started to escape from the ghetto. They escaped the ghetto. Many of them were shot. We heard that they were caught outside the ghetto and were shot, and that's what it is. But they rather took the chance and rather to be directed what they saw, what they knew, what was going on. Now, not too long again, time elapsed, not too long times. I'm trying to congest the whole thing. I'm not going to go over details and so on because my time, I know, is limited here. You had a long session here and so on. So next thing, we knew that the same thing after 5-6 weeks elapsed again. The trucks coming back in the morning, in the early morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, the group bullhorns are full of announcements. Every mother has to bring the children are going to be resettled in a beautiful conditions. They're going to be resettled in a different camp, in a children's camp, where they will be provided again with a very better food, better medical condition, the same junk that they had presented before. And many people, of course, now it was, I don't know, we have in the Jewish tradition, we have Tisha B'Av. This is a commemoration of the destruction of the two temples. We tear our clothes, we sit on the ground for 24 hours. We fast that day. We go to the synagogue, sit on the ground. It's a very tragic day for us, and we commemorating these two events, the destruction of the two temples. This is what happened there. It was tragedy happened. These mothers couldn't bear anymore. They did not want to go with their children. Many of them were shot in this spot where my aunt and my cousin, she didn't want to go there to that place where they designed to bring them, to bring these children in and to have them trucked. They put them on the truck. She didn't want to bury. The SS came into the courtyard, and they brought it down from the apartment to the courtyard. In the courtyard, the policeman was there, Jewish policeman, standing. We were looking out of the windows. They shot her there with the baby in her arms, gave a bullet in thing, and it came through the baby, through her, through the baby, and that's how she was. She was bleeding. She was carrying on for a while. She was, yet her body was moving and everything else. So she pleaded with him, please shoot me, shoot me, shoot me. And then we heard from our upstairs apartment to shoot her because she was still alive, bleeding to death. She was pleading with the German and the Ukrainian SS, please shoot me because I'm still alive, you didn't finish me. And they did that. They obliged with that. They took a carabine, the Ukrainian police, the auxiliary police, and obliged with it and shot her. And then she was dead, and the baby was dead. This was the picture that we saw there. The cries went up to the heavens that those days of those mothers that had delivered those children onto those trucks, and many of them paid. They didn't want to do it. Many of them tried to go with these children on these trucks. You say, if you're going to take my child, you're going to take me. So they oblige. They say, you want to go? Come in into the truck. So they trucked the mothers with their children. Many of them went on the truck. And of course, there was blood was flowing through the sewers and everywhere. You could see the bloody streets all over the ghetto. Was a terrible day. As I said, that was the day that one never forgets. One never forgets. And this is what we live with. I mean, you see, that's. I am talking now to you here, addressing this honorable audience here, but it's something in me, inside me, that it just cries out, and I can't express it with tears anymore because I don't have it. So, but I can tell you that those scenes are always before me, and I never can get rid of those. And many times I get up at night where I get it, and that's 55 years after this tragedy happened. So you can imagine, and I mean, it's indescribable, the picture of those mothers loading up and going with those children on those trucks. Never did. So this is something which happened there. Now, again, these children were going. We had our friends, Polish friends, Gentile friends. We asked them whether they would be good enough to see what happened, follow these trucks, because we were quarantined there. On that day, no one could leave. That was called the Aktionsday. They had a name for the Aktionsday. Selection or Aktionsday, we call it. Nobody, but we had friends outside, very, very good friends, and they were very constantly, always under they were trying to protect us from outside so that we don't get ourselves into that predicament, be trucked away or so. But, of course, nothing can help. I always told them all we want to know, and these people, there are my cousins there, a few cousins on those, in this selection, and my son was one of them. where these people, where did they take and try to follow these trucks? And they were kind enough, many of them were kind, they were wonderful people, good friends. They followed these trucks as much as they could on the motorcycles or many on the bicycles. But how far can you travel after that? Some of them were able to go to, they thought maybe that they would go to the station, train station. They load them up in the trains, they'd follow it. But it wasn't the case. They took them in the trucks, and they, of course, found their places. Then, of course, started to come out the Treblinka, the names of these terrible death camps, Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor, and all the others came to light. But we didn't know what happened there. They were able, only the friends, the Polish acquaintances, were able to reach certain area up till a certain point, and there was no return, no point of return. They had to return because that was all fenced in into towers. The SS had towers all over these camps with machine guns, men by the SS, and so on. So they returned. They told us that that's what they went. But that's all we knew. It was eventually the news came through, the good news. The news came in that these people are going to the gas chambers there. Those times, there were crude gas chambers, yet they put many people on these trucks. They had those vans, with mobile vans, which the SS had, where they had used the carbon monoxide pipes, where they loaded up people in the back, and the guy in the cabin, the driver of the truck that was there, at certain point could turn back that carbon monoxide, which had gassed these people. They were gassed crude ways. People were starting, even Germans, even some Germans, started to rebel against that. They said, this is inhuman, and so on, what to them. We heard these rumors. Of course, these people were loaded up, and they were dying by the hundreds, and taken right from those, in those same trucks, they were taken to near the forest and buried there. Many times, the people that were living in the surrounding area came back with the information that these bodies were still moving, and they were burying them. They were buried, and they were still moving, and because they weren't dead yet. But that's what they do. This is the cruelty. It's unbelievable, and I couldn't express it even, how cruel and how sadistic these people were. This is what happened to most of these people. Of course, now, this is 1942 already. We are now, the ghetto has to be emptied out. They say the ghetto has to be liquidated, and the rumor is that we are going to be transferred out to Kraków-Płaszów. Kraków-Płaszów, many probably heard of that camp because the Schindler List, the movie Schindler List, is played out there. If you saw the movie, you saw this was the place where we were transferred out of the ghetto and put into this kind of a camp. This camp was already built there. We weren't aware of it. But this camp was prepared already by other prisoners, inmates of different camps from different towns, and this was fenced in with electric wiring all around, and again with the same turns, with the same towers where there were machine guns on towers with the men manned by the SS, also Ukrainian SS, by the way. And we were now told to liquidate this ghetto. A lot of people, again, they, at the risk of their lives, they started to try to escape. There was no way to escape because they were right away, before, when that order comes in, before that order came in, already the SS were surrounding the ghetto with guns, and you couldn't move because they were there. So many people, at the risk of their lives, they found some spots over fences or so where the fence, where the SS maybe turned around for a minute or so. They were cutting those wires and trying to get, of course they didn't get away. They were shot dead. But we are now going to Krakow, this concentration camp where you saw it, the people that saw the picture, Schindler's List saw it. This was a terrible camp. This was a very, very rigid. There we lived, survived, and I can tell you what we were getting. This was the daily rations we were getting when we came in there. We were getting a piece of bread, maybe as 5 or 6 ounces of bread with a coffee in the morning. At 6 o'clock, we had to assemble before the barracks, and there we have to go to assigned work. What was the work? We did the work, the stone, there was a quarry there. The stones we carried from one place. Today we carry there, and tomorrow. This was just to make people completely dehumanize people and just tear us apart. And of course I was a child, only 14, 15 years then. I was lucky that I wasn't held back because there were many, many children that were in hiding in ghetto, somehow by luck, by good luck and God's help, you know, they were in hiding. The parents hiding or in basements or anywhere. These kids and the elderly, the few elderly that they found immediately were taking away only healthy bodies, and somebody was strong enough, was let out from that ghetto to be transferred out to this concentration camp in Russia. There, of course, the assignment was different kind of work. As I mentioned, quarry was there. This was just a camp that was just to run you down completely, and once you were unable to work, that when you were shipped out of there to different Majdanek, and once in a while they would come in there the same way as they came to the ghetto with the trucks, and they would ship you out. Once you were unable to do the work, or you were already falling from your strength and didn't have the strength, you were shipped out of there to gas chambers, to Majdanek or Treblinka or other camps like that. Of course, I was separated from my parents. My parents were now separate from me. My sister, I had my sister, she was that time. But fortunate, as I say, I was pretty well built for my age. I was 15 at that time, maybe, and I was well built, so I was able to climb through the lines and get away from the Germans that were selecting the kids, and I was able to get through that. And so did my sister. We both, of course, my parents were there, and they directed us where to go, what to do, and we followed that direction. And thank God for that, we were saved, because otherwise they would immediately spotted us there as kids, and immediately we would have been segregated and go to the other places. Now in Krakow, there is now the Germans are establishing workshops, different workshops, and they were fortunate enough to get a work assignment to these workshops. These workshops were working. There were tailor shops, shoemaker shops, furrier shops, all these different shops that were used for the German army supply, to supply the German army with these uniforms, other tailor shops and furriers and so on. All these went to the German army for supply of the German army. And they were working, they brought in from the other towns wherever they plundered and robbed, the other places, they brought all the machinery. Trucks, machines came in every day, trucking and machinery from the outside into the concentration camp, and they established these workshops. These workshops were maybe 150, 200 work. Immediately, my father told me, even so I was separated from him. We were in 2 different camps. The camps were separated by wire, by barbed wire, because I was in the one camp and he was in the other camp. There he told me to volunteer as a Klempner. Klempner is a tinsmith in German. And I was able to register as a helper to a tinsmith, Klempner helper. So I volunteered, and I told him that they were looking for certain trades. to man these places. So I told him that I was a helper of a plant, a Smith helper, and they needed a trade because they had a shop there which was providing the German again for the Germans with this type of the materials that they needed. They told me, fine, this is your assignment and that's where you go. In the morning we assembled every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, we had to assemble before the barracks. We were counted every day, every minute of the day, we were counted whether somebody didn't disappear or so. But there was no way to disappear because this camp was so tight, security tight, that you couldn't in an imaginable way. Because there were already electrical wires all through, barbed wire, and the towers were very close to the thing. Nobody could escape them. So I was assigned to that work, and in the morning we appeared on the Appellplatz, which was called Appellplatz, where everybody had to assemble there in groups wherever you were. You were assigned by this group. You were assigned to this shop, and you had to appear there. And you were counted and let go. There, that's where we were getting a piece of, as I mentioned, 8 ounces of bread and a coffee, black coffee, and we were out to work. Now, work, I was only, as I say, a kid. What could I do? I was assigned to this place. They gave me a work there. They assigned me to work. What I had to do, There was very, very, not any professional skill that I had to have. It was very something which anybody could do. I was doing, there, I was, I think maybe less than 6-7 months I was working there. And then, of course, came a call for the Amalienwerke, which was the Schindler's factory. They needed, again, tinsmith, and I volunteered for that kind of work. I told them as a helper to this because I worked already. I had the experience of working there. Again, I was assigned to Schindler's List. And there's Schindler's factory, Amalienwerke, which was called then Amalienwerke. What did they do there? We did pots and pans for the army. There we did. That was a better place already. There you didn't see the murder, the beatings, and the camp there. Well, I was there in Russia. There were everyday dead bodies, and there were people that were falling down from their feet, from their feet and down because they couldn't bear it. The physical work that what they did, or the hunger that they had suffered. At night when we came from work to finish this, we got a soup, what consisted of soup was a bowl of hot water and maybe 2-3 potatoes flying in there. And this was our daily rations. And that we had to survive. So you can imagine it was not to survive or to die on this kind of ration, but we did the best we could under the circumstances. Many people, as I say, they starved from hunger. They starved and they became so weak that they couldn't go to work. These people were immediately eliminated. They were taken out of the camp. They were going already to Auschwitz and other camps. Now, in the late, now I'm transferred out of this, and I say to the Schindler's factory, which was called the Amalienwerke. There, the circumstances were much better. There we were getting a little better food. First of all, we had a contact with the population, the Polish population that worked they were working in the factory with us. So we could always, my friends of my parents, they were able to come there. They found out through different ways that I worked there, so they brought some food for me and everything else so that to keep me alive. But the food there, you could survive on it. It wasn't sufficient, but you could survive on it because they knew that you needed the work to be done. This Schindler had a very good, as you saw in the picture, he had a wonderful connections with the SS, with the commandant who was Amnon Get then. He was the SS commandant. He was a sadist. Every morning he'd go out to the camp with his 2 dogs. He had 2 dogs. They were Great Danes, and with a pitcher, with a stick or whatever you call it, with a leather strap, and he would go out in camp, and if he saw somebody, he didn't like your face, you had to, of course, you immediately, when you saw him, you had to stop and salute and mention your name, your number and your name. And if he didn't like your face, he told you to turn around. Or he let the dogs to tear you apart. He didn't like about you, didn't do the work or so well and so on. Every night, during the night, they had parties in that camp in Krakow, Russia. The commandant, the Get, had parties with other SS, with other people there in his house. He had a special house there, not within the camp, but it was a little outside the camp. It's still on the grounds of the camp. And there he lived he had parties every night, almost parties. He got drunk in the middle of the night. Again, he made his rounds to the different shops, and he looked how people working. If he didn't like something which was done in the shops, in the workshops, again, he called there was a couple, which was the supervisor. He was the foreman. He called him in. He says, why is this, that? He didn't answer he didn't give him the right answer. He started to beat him up, and unmercifully, many times he would take the dogs, and he'd say, let the dogs on it, and the dogs would tear apart his bird. So once he was through, he had to be eliminated. Now, I lasted there not too long because there was escape there, and after that escape, they took us back to the escape. I was one of the escapees, actually. Two of my friends escaped at Schindler's factory, Marienberg, outside the camp, and I was one. 3 of us were to escape. I was the last to jump the window when they assessed the guard that was guarding the place, noticed that something is going on. I went back, and they took us back. For that, they counted us. We saw the 2 men were missing. I got a tremendous beating because they knew that they were my friends. They investigated me, interrogated me. They beat me up so that I was unconscious, threw me up in the truck. SS came in and took us back to the camp where we came from, Prussia, Krakow, Prussia. There, the thing with, again, as I say every day, we saw people coming in, brought in from the outside with the Gestapo on the trucks, and there was a certain place, designed place there, where they shoot these people, they machine gun them, they would tell them first to undress very cleanly. They never suspected anything, because when you came into the camp, they had these loudspeakers playing music, beautiful music. And nobody says these people came out from outside, from nowhere. We didn't know where they come from. They brought them in. Many of these people were partisans, who were political prisoners, or some political involvement. They were involved in politics. They brought them in, and on that place, there was a big ditch there where they shot in cold-blooded. They first told them to undress. Clearly, these people were many officers, Polish officers, Polish intellectuals, yet that they caught it outside and they brought him in there. That was the place where they eliminated, right there. Because nothing came out of there. There was no information going out of there. We were all doomed. And that was it. They knew that everybody of us would be executed eventually. Now, of course, this lasts too long now. I am shipped, as I mentioned to you, to Auschwitz. From Auschwitz, we are loaded up on those cars, 150 to 170 people. We are now shipped from there because the liquidation of Auschwitz was already there. The Russian army was coming in from one side, from the east, the other from the west. Now, we go into Oranienburg in Sachsenhausen. We didn't know what we were doing. These people, when we came to Oranienburg after about 7 or 8 days trip on those trains, open trains, without any food at all, they did not feed us all. What we did was ate that ice. The snow was coming down, and we ate that, and this was our food, daily food. We survived. How? I don't know. By the time we came there, all these skeletons from Auschwitz, that these people that were worked so hard to death, they came out, and my freight train. Out of the 150, 170 people, only 25 or 27 remained. We came out and we were unloaded. The rest were frozen into the bottom of the freight car. And many, many times we had to throw over the bodies because the stench was such, even in the winter time, that we couldn't bear it. The few people that were still strong, we had to take them over there and bury them. Then we came to Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen. There, Sachsenhausen is not far from Berlin, if you know the geography of Germany. There, we were already the Russians were making forward moves, and they were coming, not close, enclosing on the Germans. And there, they took us again, after a couple of days, taking us, loading us up, the rest, whoever remained, out of the transport. I don't know, we had a transport maybe 2,000 people, and we arrived there, 100 was very good. I don't know exactly the figures, I couldn't tell you. But we came to that. Now we are shipped again on those same trains. They were waiting there, they were cleansed, and cleaned up from the other prisoners. They were dumped there, and we had to load up again. Now we go into Mauthausen. This was my last camp where I was liberated. It was Mauthausen. Mauthausen was a death camp, as you may know. Many, many prisoners there were political prisoners. They were the prisoners of all these different countries, diplomats, and also all the other people that were in government positions before the occupation. They were herded into that camp, and most of them died out there because the starvation was terrible. They were, you can imagine one thing, I don't know if one can imagine it, that when one day the Allied planes came and bombed that camp. Of course, the bomb came into the concentration camp, which we were glad to see because our lives didn't mean anything anymore. We all knew that we had a death sentence in our pocket. But when these planes came in and bombed, we were joy. We were still, as much as life we had, we were joyous to see them. But these planes decimated many, many of the prisoners. They were already there, Russian prisoners, the PWOs from Russian armies, that they were there. They were eating flesh of those people that were murdered. One cannot imagine this hunger. We did not starve. We were cutting down grass. We were grasping for grass, and we were cooking in the pots that we had. Everybody, because there was no food, the Germans already, most of them evacuated the camp because they ran, and they left us there with the old guards, 70, 60-year-old guards. They managed the terms already because they already were running. They knew what the end was going to be. I was fortunate enough, of course, by the time many thousands of people that remained there in that camp got typhus, were stricken with typhus. I had 105 or 106 temperature. Of course, that was by God's design. I was one of the doctors that was there, was a man from Krakow, doctor from Krakow, who knew my family. He saw me I was in the Haufen, it was like a stoke of people there. He pulled me out of bed because I was already declared as dead and thrown out before the barracks with the dead bodies. He saw me, he recognized me there. He saw, and he was attending doctor by the Germans there in this place, and he took me out of that, and he started to bring me back to life with of course, in a few days, Americans came, which was our good fortune. The ones that still were alive, most of it, I would say, I don't know by percentage, but great deal of percentage of these people were already dead. They were just skeletons. They were skeletons. All they were is bones, and that's all. And they were all dead. And he took me out, and of course the American people, American army came in. The first thing when they came in, they started to attend us with the nurses, with plasma. They brought us to life back. Well, many, many of us really can thank God in the American army that were there at the time that we were saved. Otherwise, we would have all perished. Another couple of days, none of us would have survived there. We were just left completely outside. I think my time is up now. I just get a hint here.
No, I'm sorry.
And it's all right, that's okay. And
We do have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone would like to ask a question of Mr. Zimmerman.
I'd be only glad to answer any questions, please.
Did your sister survive?
My sister was fortunate enough. They were survived. My mother and my sister were separated. They were taken to very